And you've just heard Bevel by Idiogram, which is from the album Reunion of Broken Parts, which is out now. And I'm joined now by Ali, Leslie, and Keith from the band. Hello there.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
So the last time you were on the show, the album was a few months away, and now it's here. How are you all feeling? Ali, start with yourself since you're up the top there.
Yeah, good. Like excited. It's. I think we probably said last time it's been kind of a long road to get this music out. So I think we're all pretty excited about letting everybody else hear it. So it's not just in our heads anymore. So everybody else can hear it. So it's busy, but it's an exciting time for sure.
And yourself, Leslie, I mean, now that it's out and about in the real world, how does it feel?
Yeah, it's great. I'm super excited for people to hear it. You know, like we're really proud of it. Like we've put like a lot of ourselves into it. And like, you know, we know it's not going to be to everybody's tastes, but I'm really excited to see like, you know, who it connects with. And you know, it's been a much longer road than we'd planned as well. So it's kind of like reaching the end of a marathon, really. We're trying not to like crawl over the finish line. We're going to like be triumphant with it.
You've bust through the tape. Don't worry
Yeah.
about that.
That's the truth.
What about yourself now that you get to hear these on? Oh, I've got a CD copy which I've got here. Thank you to Ali for bringing that. But yeah, how are you feeling about the whole thing now?
It is exciting, yeah. As we're getting to the launch night is next. Although I'm sure we'll come back to this, but the launch night for the album is next week in Edinburgh. And as everything's been kind of converging towards that, we're getting these little, you know, the CDs get delivered. You know, the visuals guy has come to a rehearsal. So certain very cool things are coming to a head. So we're all getting these little bursts of enthusiasm for it, which I think are helping to push us all through the. I won't put a downer on it too much, but the hard slog of putting out a self-released album. So it is pulling us through it, and it's exciting.
Excellent. We'll go into some of those details a bit later on, but can you talk about the album overall, the kind of sound and what it was like to record?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you know, when we sort of put this band together, you know, no one had any material written or anything. It was just like a long list of like, I like this about, you know, these people, and I like this about this musician. We like that about that composer. You know, to sort of give ourselves a ballpark to work from, but with no real concept of actually what it would sound like at all. So, you know, from the start, like it's been a real sort of evolution. You know, quite often in a band there'll be a songwriter and someone will come with material and you'll sort of like, you know, build around that. But this is everything from the ground up. And when we went into the studio with Graham Young at Chamber Studio, who is just like phenomenal to work with, I'd like hard recommend for him. You know, we had the material existed, the notes, the rhythms, the structural, you know, existed, but we still didn't even really know at that point how it was going to sound.
Right.
At the end of the process, and we were really keen for him to have, you know, some creativity, like and like more of a collaboration with us in doing that. And you know, when we were talking about who we were going to get to make the record, we talked about lots of people, and one of the reasons that we landed on Graham was because we're like, well, if this person makes a record, I think I know how it's going to sound, and if this person makes it, I think it'll sound like this. But if Graham makes it, actually we don't know how it's going to sound, and that's sort of exciting to us. So you know, in the studio with him, we really like shaped the sound, and he had ideas and we had ideas, and my ideas were mostly like, but can we make it sound a little bit worse? You know, like that was like, you know, like could you make it sound more broken? That'd be great, thanks. And yeah, and then we came out with this thing that it's what we went in with, but it's also not in a lot of ways. You know, it has so much more depth and interest and character, and a lot of that's down to Graham. It was a real process between us all, and then of course, we've had to figure out how to do that live.
Yeah, we'll talk live in a moment. Well, it sounds, Ali, that it was you went in pretty much with a blank page, so to speak.
I mean, we kind of thought like pre-production kind of stuff ourselves. we had a reasonable idea of what we thought was what we wanted, given what we could do kind of within ourselves within the room. So I don't know that I would say it was a completely blank page, but I think it's that kind of transition from like a kind of black and white sketch, or like a kind of line drawing, and then as Leslie says, it becomes a full thing. Like it becomes a lot deeper, like a photograph, or like a kind of a tangible object, which is really cool to see. You know, all these kind of bits that we'd never even kind of considered, but Graham says something like, "Oh, this bit needs this," and then afterwards you're like, "Yeah, of course it did. Why didn't we think of that?"
That's his skill, right? That is his skill of doing that.
Oh,
absolutely. It was also like
this
is an often repeat little quip, but I'll repeat it here. Like one of the first questions I think he asked us was, do you want to record it like you play it, or do you want to make an album? And he used that emphasis I've just put there was his, and we're like, yeah, definitely option 2. And later we got to find out exactly how much you'd have to do to reproduce the stuff he'd created, which has been our journey for the last couple of years.
So was that sort of him saying, you can either just go and we can record it and that's it, or him saying an album was basically putting himself forward, I'm going to be involved in this as well? Was that the way of saying that? I
think so. That's what Leslie just said a little minute ago there. I was like, yeah, he fully enjoyed us as a collaborator. It wouldn't have sounded anything like it sounds now without his particular flavor and his particular way of making a record. And so yeah, definitely he's the fifth Beatle here, really.
Yeah. And I think, you know, like he would downplay his involvement in that process, but I think he'd be doing himself a disservice in doing so, you know.
So how did it work for you as a band in the studio? What was the kind of setup? Just kind of explain a little bit about that.
Do you want to take that, Keith?
So this was down at the facility he had in Granton at the time, Granton New Haven, excuse me, and we did a lot of the tracking live. Yeah, so we had I think most of the tracks had at least one full take with, say, the drum kit, the bass, the main guitar, and the piano line, and then we'd add on the extra layers from there. Graham would sometimes want to track certain effects and layers with the parts as they were going down, and then sometimes he'd want to layer the one afterwards. So yeah, we took maybe, I think, the better part of a full week in the studio for the initial passes, and then at least another week. I can't remember. It literally was quite a few years ago now. At least another week of doing additional production after that, additional parts being tracked. Creative ideas coming out. Certainly, at least one track, Hyperaccumulator, had in fact, it's the intro to the album. There we go. This is a good story. That there's a scuzzy shuffle thing going right at the start of Hyperaccumulator. That came out someone's idea, and I went, "Oh, that's a good one." And then we did it there and then, and that's where it happened. That wasn't the intro to the song before, so there were a few of those little happy accidents occurred as well. Have I covered the bases, folks?
Yeah, I think
pretty much. Yeah.
And you said that some of that happened years ago. What was the timeline of this album? How long have you guys been working on it?
That's a very scary question, Ali.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, we were kind of putting together demos. I think 2019, and we were kind of getting, things kind of in line to start recording probably 2020, and then events. So I think by the time we got to the studio was like March 22.
Yeah, March 22.
That sounds about right. And we did 3 or 4 weeks with Graham, and then a couple of bits kind of further after throughout the summer, just to kind of finish off the final bits.
We had like I mean, like, it was, it was still sort of COVID times, the sort of tail end of like the worst of it. But we'd spent a couple of weeks tracking the main bits, or maybe it was just a week tracking, and then the day that I was supposed to come in and start putting down pianos and synths, I got like my first dose of COVID, and I got like I had my ass absolutely kicked by it. It was like it was brutal, and and that sort of really that pushed our timeline quite far down, because we had Graham booked for a certain amount of time, and then we lost a week and a half, and so we didn't manage to complete what we'd set out to do in the time that we had. And then of course Graham was booked, so then it became a case of sort of like fitting little bits in here and there when we were sort of like all free. And I actually think that we started recording the album in March 22. I think we didn't finish it. I think the last notes went down maybe more like August that year. We'd planned that it would be finished by May, and then it just...
I confess I'd forgotten this level of detail, but yeah, of course, it was all a bit blighted, wasn't it? We've had this sort of running non-joke for the many years we've been doing this, of the curse. Like, what will the curse produce this time? Yeah, I don't know. We've been blaming it for geopolitical events and upward for just everything so far, but yeah.
So when Leslie's talked about just kind of crawling over the finishing line, it must feel a little bit like that. You've managed to kind of, against all odds, make it through.
Yeah, I mean, the universe clearly does not want this record, but it's getting it anyway.
I am really glad it is. I was thinking, as I was listening to it this morning, a couple of things. One, if you've got an album that has songs with lyrics on it, you can almost pick up themes that run through the lyrics. But are there themes on this album that maybe, listeners might not get, but you guys know about?
I think we all have I don't know, we all have sort of different connections to the music, I think. So, like, for example, like Ali has very strong color connections to each song. Like, he's very clear about like that's the color for this song. Right. And I have very strong like, it's not really like, I wouldn't describe it as like a narrative, but like, for me, every song is a very specific and complex feeling. And I think, it's probably different for everyone.
Right.
And I think probably for the people who listen to it as well, that will also be true for them. And like, personally, the art that I find the most interesting is not the stuff that's telling me what to think.
Yeah, sure.
It's the stuff that's asking me questions about what do I feel, what do I think, instead of just being like, well, here it is. And I kind of hope that some people find a bit of that.
Yeah. The other question I wondered was backlisting. How did you, was that a big debate about what starts the album and how it follows on?
That particular one, I think, was, we tried to work out how we could start it. And I can go back to Graham's quote here. When we did that intro that I mentioned, the one that came out kind of in the studio all by itself, Graham said, "That's the most obnoxious intro I've ever heard." And I went, that'll do nicely. Again, we've got this, our contrarian vibes might be coming through quite strongly here, Alice, but it's definitely a part of us. So that one did. And as we arranged the rest of the tracks, I think it was you, Les, who said that it eventually felt like there was an electronic first half and an organic second half. And that sort of, again, that kind of emerged just out of what we felt would be the natural order of the tracks. So yeah, some sort of emergent properties perhaps are there, yeah.
Now, so far we've got You Want It More Broken and the first track, Obnoxious. Go with that. I like what we're getting.
It's a real thing, right? I think we have some tracks that do have that kind of real pushy, nasty quality to them, and then there are some really serene moments, and I enjoy that balance. Bevel's a beautiful track. I think it's, and I say that as my, for my collaborators here, like, the parts are amazing to listen to. And the album closer is also this wonderful journey. I don't play much on that one, so that's a moment where I can just relax and enjoy these three amazing musicians in front of me playing these parts, and then I come in at the end. So yeah, it's a wide palette.
And it's interesting, Leslie, that you think it can be divided in the way that Keith explained into two parts, because I'm thinking about it now, and I can kind of see that as well. Were you thinking, well, how were you dividing it then in terms of, did you think of it like two sides of an album? Was it as simple as that, or not really?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really consider that so much in putting the track listing together, but like, as we landed on the track listing that felt right to us, it sort of became clear that there was like this sort of like journey sort of like through it, starting with this really like filthy, distorted synthy stuff in Hyper Accumulator, and Butcher's Parcel's very electronic, and then Lady Coats is like actually very serene really as a song, but it's all held together in this sort of like digital bubble of like soundscape. And then by the time we get to Chromosphere and Tidal Disruption, which is sort of like, it's kind of two tracks run into one, but also it's one track. Who knows what we were thinking? Maybe we weren't. It's got like this really clear transition from like, a very stable thing, like through chaos, and then at the end of that track it gives way to like a sample of Birdsong, and then we get into Bevel, which is really all focused around like guitar and piano melody. And, there's always going to be weird stuff in there when it comes to us. And then Twilight Sleep was the first song we ever wrote, which is after Bevel, which was we wrote as just the four of us in the room, and it's the one that's remained the most, I guess, pared back in terms of like additional layers and depth. And then by the time we get to Telemetry, it's really, there's this like really cool sort of like electroacoustic soundscape behind it, but the focus the whole way is just on like the interaction and the evolution of the organic instruments, and and it's just like, it feels like they're just really there on display at the end.
Right.
And it wasn't necessarily an intentional sort of like journey, but when we chose the track listing, it became apparent that that's what we were doing.
There was a thing. So I think Keith absolutely nailed it when he said there's a kind of emergent property to it, because there's only so many ways that you could put these tracks in, and we kind of thought there's like 3 or 4 that have kind of spoken word samples or kind of noticeable voice, I guess. Should we put these all next to each other? That's how it ended up in the end, kind of towards that tail of the album. You do hear more kind of voice samples and that sort of thing. But it wasn't the kind of number one consideration. It just kind of turned out that way. Yeah. So it does go to that kind of two halves thing, which is really interesting.
Are there songs which didn't make the album?
There are lots of parts of songs that didn't make the album.
Yeah. So how did you know? Was it easy to say, yes, that's it, done, step away, we are finished? Or no? Actually, Leslie's shaking her head. Well, I think you're all shaking your head. Okay. So how did is that something Graham had to say? Just leave it. I mean, how did it work?
We are chronic tinkerers. Like even now, like once we get off this call, we've got rehearsal tonight. I'm like, I think I'm going to go put a wee sound in there in my like setup. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it'll be nice to have the album launch over, because it'll be like, stop touching it, stop.
Kid you not? Yeah, another one. It's in the middle of Chromosphere Tidal Disruption. This is bang up to date. There's a bit that we were doing, and we realised at a warm up gig we did a couple of weeks ago, and we got one precise piece of feedback, which is this particular bit doesn't work, and we were like, I think you're right, we have to change it. So like, yeah, it's edgy up in here, I must say.
I think like committing it to records does force your hand a little.
Well, that's the thing, you can no longer tinker, and I guess to be able to say, yeah, this is done, it must be a relief. But I guess kind of having spoken to you there's little bits of you going, we could just have done a little thing there, or you wake up the next morning and go, by jingo, I've got it. But
it becomes a snapshot, right?
Yeah,
like it's always a kind of changing thing.
That's a good one. We had this thing
it's
of
nice to have that thing at that particular time.
There's this idea I encounter sometimes, which is like that the gig is the work in progress and the album is the definitive version. And it's very tempting to think of that because, of course, you spend time and money and you put it down on something physical media, hopefully, and that's the finished thing. I think for us, maybe partly due to it being so long, the process, I think it's the other way up. I think the album's been the snapshot in time, and the version we've got now is the final version. I don't know if you share that sentiment, but
yeah, I mean, I don't think there will ever be a final version. I think there will be a current version.
All that said, we are playing the album in full from front to back at the album launch, and that will be as near as you can possibly make it to the recording Graham gave us. So, yeah,
it's a really interesting idea because I've spoken to a lot of jazz musicians over the years. And that's exactly what they do. Every kind of live show is different. They're improvising constantly. And but if they capture it on a record, on album, then, that's how people sometimes expect it. But I think in the jazz world, it's almost more expected that, you won't hear the same thing night on night or whatever. So you kind of mentioned live shows. Unfortunately, when this goes out on the radio, your launch will have been, and I'm sure it'll be a massive success. But what can people expect from IDIOGRAM live performances?
So I think the one thing that we are keen to add for a kind of live performance is a visual aspect, and we've been doing rehearsals with Sam Healy. You may know, is doing like kind of live projections for us, like live coding the projections. So that's one thing that we're really keen to explore in the live shows. Do you guys want to add to that?
The stuff that he's done, we've just seen it a couple of times now in the rehearsals with him. Really took our heads off. Like, we were, we've seen him. We saw him in another context with his group Board Game, and we loved it, and we thought it'd be a great fit. But to actually see him do something for our particular music, we were all a little distracted just trying to watch his output. So I think we're all super stoked. To keep working with him if we can.
And as I'm talking to you before the launch, how you all feeling about it? You really excited? Is it?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty excited actually. I think we are always a group of people who will fill all available time, right? So it's just really in the last couple of weeks that I've started really feeling like, yeah, this feels good now. And we were supposed to have our launch in November. Just not long after we'd spoken to you last time, actually, and then of course it was due to be at Summer Hall, which there was a whole lot of stuff there, and we had to reschedule it. And I think that had we done it then, we'd have been feeling very anxious on that stage about our ability to do our music justice. So we've really we've gained some extra time. It's really been a win for us overall, and we spent a lot of time just perfecting things, making sure the balances of our sounds are right, making sure that our frequencies aren't clashing with each other, and all that stuff, like just cleaning it and sharpening it up. And I think it's really starting to feel like, yeah, this feels good to play now.
Yeah.
It's not anxiety the whole time. But presumably we'll be quite nervous about it. But yeah, I'm just really excited to play it live for people. We haven't done that much of that, so it's going to be great.
Well, I wish you all the best for the launch when it comes. I'm sure it'll be a huge success. I love the album. I've been listening to it since last night and this morning again. It's a fantastic piece of work. And thanks again for taking the time to talk to me. It's always a pleasure.
And thanks so much for having us. Yeah, we really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. And this is IDIOGRAM and Lady Coates.